Hi, everybody. Welcome to the fourth lecture in our chapter 17 for our anatomy and physiology. Now we're going to talk about the thyroid gland and then the parathyroid gland. So the thyroid gland sits in the cervical region. It wraps around the trachea. And there are two major lobes to the thyroid gland. So you have a right and a left lobe, and they're connected by a region called the isthmus of the thyroid. You can see it here. And then on the posterior aspect, so here's the thyroid, but this is just a posterior aspect, you can see these tiny little blue structures. These are called parathyroid glands. And so everybody has parathyroid glands, either between 2 and 6. The most common number is 4, and that's why they're showing 4 parathyroid glands there. There we go. So the thyroid gland itself has two groups of cells. We have the follicular cells, and then we have parafollicular cells. And so here we can see a follicle, and here's another follicle, and here's another follicle. So the follicular cells line that follicle, and these are the cells that produce what we call our thyroid hormone. There are two types of thyroid hormone that are produced, T3 and T4, or triiodothyronine and thyroxine. Together, we call them thyroid hormone. Both of these are amine hormones, and these are the only amine hormones that are considered lipid soluble. So they are amines, but they are lipid soluble amines. They contain iodine. So if we don't have iodine in our diet, then these hormones can't be produced. So think about your daily life and where you get iodine from. Most of you probably thought, oh, table salt, because our table salt is typically iodized. In some countries, iodine is not easy to come by, and these individuals can't produce thyroid hormone as effectively. Without iodine, we can't produce thyroid hormone. So thyroid hormone functions in increasing our body metabolism. So it works with growth hormone to stimulate growth of muscles, bones, tissue, and repair, of course. The parafollicular cells then are in between the follicular cells. So we have follicular cells here, we have follicular cells here, but in between we have parafollicular cells. Parafollicular cells produce another hormone called calcitonin, and calcitonin is going to be released in response to high blood calcium levels. So we see this hormone being released in infancy, in children, in childhood, in teens. Calcitonin is not very common in adults. We don't produce a lot of calcitonin because there's not a lot of individuals that have so much calcium in their blood that they have to produce that calcitonin to lower that blood calcium level. In general, we're told that we have to raise our blood calcium levels and eat more calcium-based foods, drink more milk, calcium-based drinks, get out into the sun a little bit each day so that you get the calcitriol, which allows us to absorb calcium. Calcium is not easy to be easily absorbed, that's what I should say. So we need calcitriol. Calcitriol is a hormone that starts production in the skin, so that's when our skin actually functions in endocrine activity as well. And so because of this, we don't see calcitonin being released very often in adults. The metabolic thyroid hormones are going to be controlled via negative feedback. So I told you that almost all of our hormones are controlled via negative feedback. Examples of hormones that are not controlled that way, you would have oxytocin as an example of a hormone that is a positive feedback controller. But negative, or it functions in a positive feedback loop, I should say. Metabolic thyroid hormone is controlled via negative feedback. So if we have low thyroid hormone levels in our body, then our hypothalamus releases thyroid releasing hormone. Thyroid releasing hormone stimulates the anterior pituitary to release thyroid stimulating hormone. Thyroid stimulating hormone stimulates the thyroid gland to release thyroid hormone. Thyroid hormone then increases ATP production and increases metabolism. When we have high levels of thyroid hormone in our system, that's going to inhibit the hypothalamus and the anterior pituitary from releasing their hormones, and that decreases the amount of thyroid stimulated or of thyroid hormone in our system. Negative feedback, classic. So disorders of the thyroid gland. One of those disorders is a goiter. There are two types of goiters. Your book doesn't really talk about the two types of goiters. The most common goiter is associated with low iodine levels. And so this is where the thyroid gland is overstimulated by thyroid stimulating hormone, and it causes the thyroid gland itself to increase in size. And so that's what you're seeing there is a large goiter in the neck of this individual. This can lead to hypothyroidism, so low thyroid levels. And most often we see these goiters in individuals that don't have iodine in their diet. So in the US, we don't tend to see these types of goiters very often, but they can occur. Another goiter that is more commonly seen in the US is a toxic goiter. So that's a goiter associated with hyperthyroidism, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. So hypothyroidism is associated with low thyroid hormone levels. So you're not producing enough thyroid hormone. This can lead to weight gain, obesity, physical sluggishness, mental sluggishness. That doesn't mean that you don't know things. That means that your brain just isn't working as fast. It leads to being cold intolerant, so you're very cold all the time. Your body's not producing enough ATP, so you're not moving your muscles as often. Typical treatment of hypothyroidism is to increase thyroid levels by hormone replacement. Another disorder is hyperthyroidism. So with hyperthyroidism, the thyroid gland is overproducing thyroid hormone. This can be because of another disorder called Graves' disease. So in hyperthyroidism, if it's your own immune system attacking the thyroid gland, so it basically mimics thyroid stimulating hormone and binds to the thyroid gland, it stimulates the production, the constant production of thyroid hormone, because you have antibodies in your blood constantly. So they're constantly binding, causing an overproduction of thyroid hormone. This can lead to very rapid weight loss, heat intolerance, bulging eyes, which is what I wanted to show you here. That's exothalamus. Higher blood pressure because of it, which is what causes that exothalamus. It can cause you to be to have more bouts of frustration or anger. You might be more of a trigger person where, you know, someone says something and you go off on them. You may not be able to sleep as well at night. So very opposite hypothyroidism. And this disorder, if it's associated with your immune system, the treatment is to either remove the thyroid or kill the thyroid. So they use radiation to kill the thyroid, and then the thyroid gland no longer produces its thyroid hormone. In that case, you would then be considered hypothyroid or hypothyroidic, and you would have to be given thyroid hormones for the rest of your life. But if your thyroid gland is being stimulated constantly by these antibodies, that can lead to another goiter. It's typically smaller than a iodine-associated goiter, but it's still an enlargement, a swelling of that endocrine organ. On the posterior aspect of the thyroid is our parathyroid gland. Parathyroid gland helps to increase blood calcium levels when our blood calcium levels drop too low. So this hormone is antagonistic of calcitonin, which is released by the thyroid gland. So if we have low blood calcium levels, which is more common than high blood calcium levels, then the parathyroid gland, chief cells of the parathyroid gland, release parathyroid hormone. Parathyroid hormone moves into the blood and stimulates osteoclast activity and inhibits osteoblast activity. So this stimulates the osteoclast to break bone down and release calcium into our blood. It also stimulates the release of phosphate through urination, because when calcium is released into the blood, so is phosphate, and we don't want a lot of phosphate, so we get rid of that phosphate. The increase in parathyroid hormone also stimulates the production of calcitriol. Calcitriol then stimulates the absorption of calcium, and so calcium is absorbed by the intestines and by the kidneys. So all of this increases our blood calcium levels. Conversely, if we have high blood calcium levels, this is going to trigger calcitonin release by the thyroid gland, by those parafollicular cells. And they're going to release calcitonin, which stimulates osteoblast activity and inhibits osteoclast activity. And so that's going to remove the calcium from the blood. So those are antagonistic activities, and these are negative feedback loops that are controlled within our blood. That's humoral control of our endocrine system. I'll stop here and we'll get into the the adrenal glands in the next video. Bye.